All right, geometry, so you can see I actually got my classroom back, which might make some of this a little bit easier for you guys. That's my hope. I'm going to try to talk as loudly as possible to make sure that my volume comes across at an appropriate level. You guys will have to give me feedback on if things are loud enough. So for week 1, we're going to be reviewing trigonometry. So if you have this information written down somewhere, you're going to want to make sure you have access to it the whole time you do the questions this week. And if you don't have this written down somewhere, this is your chance to write it down right now. So let's remind ourselves that sine, cosine, and tangent, we're going to be using those when we are actually comparing sides in a right triangle. So sine, which is abbreviated SIN, is the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine is the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. And tangent is the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. Now we're going to start off with some really basic questions. I'm actually going to show you questions in IXL so you can see exactly the types of questions that you're going to work on. So if I look at this first question, I can see that they want me to find the cosine of angle C. Now that opposite side, adjacent side, and hypotenuse, you have to make sure that you can identify which side is which first. Since they want me to find angle C, that should be my focal point. Now, across from the angle that they ask you to focus on, that's always going to be your opposite side. I'm going to label that with O. Your right angle across from that will always be your hypotenuse. And that means that the other side is your adjacent side. Now, if I go back to the previous page very quickly. For cosine, we want the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So, looking at the diagram, the adjacent side is 36 and the hypotenuse is 85. Now, I've made it very clear to you guys in the past that reading directions is really important. This says write your answer as an integer. So if it was a whole number, we would just put 5 or 8. Or as a decimal rounded to the nearest hundredth. Normally, when it asks you to round, it's very specific. It would want you to round, in this case, to 2 decimal places. Now, you definitely can do that, or I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick. Since we're going to be taking 36 divided by 85 on the calculator, I can take 36 divided by 85 and then press enter, and I will want to round this answer. But rather than round this answer, what you can do to speed up the process is the actual IXL website will allow you to type in 36/85. So I want to show you that that will work. So down here, where I can insert my answer, I'm going to walk over here. And you can see I've typed in 36. Notice the slash, 85. I didn't round, but I'm typing it in like I'm going to do a small division problem. And you can see it gave me credit for that question. So, if you don't want to round, you can also type them in that way. Now, unfortunately, not every question will be as simple. This one is a perfect example of one that's about the same difficulty. If we move on to a slightly more challenging question, you can see that the big difference here is that one of the sides is missing. Because one of the sides is missing, before I can even begin to think about finding the tangent of angle J, I'm going to need to find the missing side. The good news is, if you did the practice skill last week, we did the Pythagorean theorem. That's what you're going to have to do in order to solve this problem. So, remember, Pythagorean theorem states c squared equals a squared plus b squared. The only number that has to be plugged into the correct position, though, is c. So again, identify your right angle, because your hypotenuse, the side across from it, will always be c. Now, if I decide to call this side A, or if I decide to call it B, both of those will give me the correct answer. I'm going to choose to call it A. Let me plug in these values. Now I'm just going to work it out like you would have done last week. Hopefully you're still pretty good with your algebra skills. We'll subtract 144 from both sides of the equation. And don't forget that in order to get rid of the square on A, we need to take the square root. So now I've solved for the missing side, and that side is 5. Now I can actually go about finding the tangent of I. We already know that 13 is our hypotenuse. We should remember that the side across from the angle they ask about is going to be our opposite side, and the other side is our adjacent side. Make sure you have this written down if you want. Fresh reminder, since we're finding tangent, we need to take the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. So this time I will be taking the opposite side, 12, divided by the adjacent side, 5. So you have two options. You can either take 12 divided by 5 on your calculator and get yourself an answer of 2.4, or you can literally type in the answer box 12 divided by 5. Both of those will give you credit. So guys, that's the end of the first skill. Make sure that if you have any questions, you ask, but hopefully this video was helpful. You'll have to give me any feedback about volume. I'll see you guys in the next one.